My beloved child, stop scrolling for just a moment. Do not dismiss this message as another passing voice among many, because something has been moving behind the curtain of your life while you were focused on everything you could see. What you are about to hear has found you at exactly the right moment. There are times when heaven allows hidden pieces of a story to surface before confusion becomes permanent, and this is one of those moments. Listen with your heart more than your ears, because what seems ordinary on the outside has been anything but ordinary in the unseen. You have been carrying questions you never fully spoke aloud. You smiled when others expected you to smile, but deep inside there has been an ache that refused to disappear. You sensed a shift. You noticed a silence that felt different. You wondered whether your intuition was warning you or simply reminding you of old fears. Even when you tried to convince yourself that everything was fine, a quiet whisper kept returning, asking the same question in different forms. Something has changed. Something feels unfinished. Something remains hidden. That whisper did not arise without reason. Last night, while the world around you settled into darkness, the person you love stepped into a conversation that has already begun changing the direction of their heart. Before fear rushes into your spirit, hear every word carefully. This is not a message meant to fill you with panic. It is a message meant to replace confusion with understanding. The truth heaven reveals is always greater than the stories fear invents. You may already be imagining the worst. Your mind may be asking whether someone else has entered the picture. You may wonder if trust has been broken, if promises have faded, or if love has quietly slipped away while no one was looking. Those thoughts have tried to take root inside your heart, but do not allow conclusions to arrive before the full story is revealed, because the meeting itself is not what you think. The mystery does not begin with who they met, it begins with why they felt they had to go. There are moments when a soul reaches a crossroads where silence becomes heavier than speech. Your loved one arrived at such a place. For days, perhaps even weeks, they carried emotions they could not organize into words. They wrestled with memories they believed they had already buried. Every conversation with others felt incomplete because the deepest conversation was happening within themselves. They smiled when necessary. They fulfilled responsibilities. They answered questions. Yet behind every ordinary moment, another battle continued unnoticed. Their heart had become divided between what they wanted to feel and what they were afraid to admit. This inner conflict finally led them to that meeting. Pause here and listen closely. Not every secret is born from betrayal. Some secrets are born from brokenness. Some are born from fear. Some are born from the desperate hope that someone might finally understand what the soul has been carrying in silence. Your loved one walked into that conversation carrying more weight than anyone around them realized. Their footsteps were not driven by excitement. They were driven by exhaustion. They had reached a place where pretending everything was fine no longer worked. They needed answers. They needed perspective. Most of all, they needed courage. That is why heaven has allowed this message to reach you now. Because if you misunderstand what happened, you may create distance where understanding was desperately needed. Yet the story grows even deeper. Long before last night arrived, your connection had already begun awakening hidden places inside both of you. You thought you were simply learning another person's habits, dreams, and personality. But beneath every shared memory, something spiritual was taking place. Every meaningful connection acts like a mirror. It reflects not only love, it also reflects wounds. Your presence exposed hopes your loved one forgot they still carried. It also exposed fears they thought they had mastered. The closer they felt to you, the louder their hidden insecurities became. This confused them. How could someone who brought them peace also awaken so much fear? They did not understand it, so instead of explaining it, they carried it alone. Last night became the breaking point. As evening settled over the world, they found themselves unable to escape their own thoughts. Memories replayed inside their mind with remarkable clarity. They remembered moments you probably forgot, the way you looked at them during an ordinary conversation, the kindness you showed when no one else noticed, the patience you offered even when they struggled to communicate. Small moments became impossible for them to ignore. They realized those moments had changed them far more than they admitted. Still, one question continued haunting them. What if I ruin the best connection I've ever known? That question echoed through every decision they made. It echoed so loudly that eventually they sought someone whose wisdom they trusted. Now listen carefully. The person they met was not chosen by accident. There was history between them, not romantic history, life history. Someone who had watched them struggle. Someone who understood parts of their past. Someone who knew the fears your loved one rarely revealed. That meeting was never about replacing you. It was about understanding themselves before they unknowingly damaged what they felt for you. Yet there was something said during that conversation that neither of them expected, something that caused complete silence to fill the room. Your name entered the conversation, not casually, not briefly. It became the center of everything. The person sitting across from your loved one asked a question that pierced straight through every defense they had built. Do you actually love them, or are you simply afraid of being alone? Those words landed like thunder. For several moments, they could not answer, not because they did not know, because the truth required more courage than they were prepared to reveal. Silence filled the space between them. Every memory, every conversation, every laugh, every misunderstanding, every unanswered message, every dream involving you, it all returned at once. Then something happened that surprised even them. Their eyes filled with emotion, not dramatic emotion, honest emotion, the kind that appears when a person stops performing strength and begins facing truth. In a voice quieter than anyone expected, they admitted something they had never fully confessed before. I've never stopped thinking about them. Those words changed the atmosphere instantly. The meeting became something entirely different. No longer was it about confusion. Now it was about honesty. The person listening leaned forward and asked another question. If that's true, then why have you kept so much hidden? Again, silence. Because the answer reached back years before they ever met you. It reached into disappointments, broken trust, promises left unfinished, moments when opening their heart led to pain instead of safety. Those old experiences quietly shaped every decision they made with you, not because you deserved distance, because they never fully learned how to trust closeness. As they continued speaking, they admitted something that has remained hidden from almost everyone. I don't know how to receive a love that feels real. Those words carried more truth than they realized. For years they believed love required earning, chasing, proving, performing. Then you entered their life offering acceptance instead of conditions. Instead of feeling secure, they became terrified, because genuine love demanded vulnerability. And vulnerability reminded them of every time they had previously been hurt, so they hesitated, not because they lacked feelings, because their heart had forgotten how to believe peace could last. Can you feel the difference? Heaven is not revealing excuses, heaven is revealing motives. There is an enormous difference between someone who withdraws because love disappeared and someone who withdraws because fear overwhelmed love. Another unexpected question entered the conversation. If they walked away tomorrow, what would you regret most? This question broke something open inside them. Without planning their answer, without rehearsing their thoughts, without protecting their image, they spoke directly from their heart. I would regret never telling them how much they changed me. Those words lingered long after they were spoken. Even they seemed shocked by what escaped their lips, because saying those words made everything real. There could no longer be denial, no pretending, no emotional hiding place. For the first time they admitted your influence had become permanent. But heaven has not yet shown you the most astonishing part, because someone else unexpectedly entered the conversation, not physically, through memory. A story from long ago resurfaced. The person meeting with your loved one reminded them of something they once said years before meeting you. Back then they declared they would never allow another person close enough to break their heart again. They made themselves a promise. No one will ever matter that much. Last night they realized they had unknowingly broken that promise, because you mattered. Far more than they intended, far more than they admitted, far more than they successfully concealed. That realization left them speechless. Their carefully controlled emotional world suddenly felt fragile. Every wall they built now seemed unnecessary. Every excuse felt empty. Every delay appeared costly. Still, there remains one detail you have not heard. During the meeting, a name was mentioned. Not yours, another name. The instant it was spoken, your loved one's entire expression changed. The room became noticeably quieter. The atmosphere shifted. Questions multiplied. The conversation turned in a direction no one expected. Who was this person? Why were they brought into the discussion? What connection did they have to your relationship? The answer is not as simple as appearances suggest, because this individual was not entering your future. They belonged to your loved one's past, a chapter they believed had already ended, but unfinished lessons have a way of returning until healing replaces avoidance. The mention of that name forced your loved one to confront something unresolved, not lingering love, lingering fear. There is an important difference. Many people mistake emotional memory for emotional attachment. They are not always the same. Sometimes the heart remembers pain long after love has disappeared. That pain quietly influences future relationships without permission. Your loved one began realizing that old disappointments were still writing invisible rules for new relationships, including yours. This realization shook them deeply, because suddenly they understood something they had never considered before. Perhaps you were never the problem. Perhaps the distance between you was never created by lack of love. Perhaps it was built by invisible fears carried forward from another season of life. This thought unsettled them more than any accusation ever could, for if fear created the distance, then fear could also destroy something beautiful if left unchallenged. At that moment, they stopped discussing everyone else. They stopped blaming circumstances. They stopped blaming timing. Instead, they looked inward. That is one of the rarest moments a soul can experience. When excuses lose their power, when truth quietly takes their place. Yet heaven watched another remarkable moment unfold. Your loved one whispered something almost too softly to hear. If I lose them because I stayed afraid, I'll never forgive myself. Those words echoed long after they were spoken. No one interrupted. No one argued. Silence itself became the response, because everyone present understood they were witnessing honesty that had taken years to emerge. Still, there is another layer hidden beneath everything you've heard, one your loved one has shared with almost no one. Several nights before this meeting, they experienced a dream unlike any they had remembered in years. In that dream, they searched endlessly through unfamiliar streets. Crowds surrounded them, voices filled the air, yet they looked only for one person, you. Every road they followed seemed close to reaching you before suddenly changing direction. Every doorway appeared promising before closing. Every step became heavier. Finally they saw your silhouette disappearing into light. They tried calling your name. No sound emerged. They tried running. Their feet refused to move. Then they awakened, heart racing, eyes filled with emotion they could not explain. Since that morning, something has felt different inside them, almost as though time itself became precious, almost as though opportunities were no longer endless. Almost as though silence carried consequences. That dream became one of the hidden reasons they agreed to last night's meeting. They needed clarity, because they sensed life was asking them a question they could no longer avoid. Will you keep hiding, or will you finally choose honesty? My beloved child, do not rush to conclusions before heaven completes what it has begun revealing. The meeting was real. The emotions were real. The questions were real, but there is one final conversation from last night that has remained completely hidden. It happened after everyone else believed the meeting had ended. Only two people remained. One sentence was spoken. One answer followed. That answer has the power to change everything you thought you understood about this connection. It contains a confession your loved one never imagined saying aloud. It reveals the true reason they have hesitated for so long, and it explains why, before the next sunrise arrives, a decision may already be forming inside their heart. But that confession has not yet been revealed, because before heaven uncovers those final words, There is one truth your soul must be prepared to hear, and when you hear it, nothing about this story will ever look the same again. My beloved child, remain with me a little longer, because the silence that followed that final conversation carried more weight than all the words spoken before it. Many people believe destiny changes through dramatic moments that everyone can see. But heaven has watched countless lives shift because of a single sentence whispered when no one else remained in the room. Last night became one of those moments. After the others had quietly departed, your loved one remained seated. They did not rush to leave. Their hands rested motionless as though they were holding an invisible burden they could no longer carry. Across from them sat the one person who had listened without judgment, someone who understood that behind every guarded heart is often a story never fully healed. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. The silence itself became a conversation. Then the other person leaned forward and asked one final question. If fear disappeared for just one day, what would you do? The question entered your loved one's heart like light entering a room that had remained closed for years. They looked downward, their breathing slowed, every excuse they had repeated to themselves suddenly seemed smaller than before. At first, no answer came. Then, almost unexpectedly, words escaped that even they had never heard themselves say aloud. I would tell them everything. The room became completely still, not because the answer was surprising, because it was undeniable. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, no carefully chosen response. Only truth. They continued speaking, their voice trembling with a mixture of hope and regret. I would tell them that every time I pulled away, I was fighting myself more than I was avoiding them. I would tell them that I noticed every message they almost stopped sending. I would tell them that I remembered every goodbye that felt unfinished. I would tell them that they became part of my prayers before I even realized it. These words were not spoken to impress anyone, they were spoken because the weight of hiding them had finally become greater than the fear of admitting them. Then something happened that neither person expected. The listener smiled gently and asked another question. If your heart already knows the truth, why are you waiting? Those words lingered in the air. Your loved one searched for an answer. They wanted to blame timing. They wanted to blame circumstances. They wanted to blame distance. But every explanation disappeared before reaching their lips. Finally they whispered the only answer left. Because I'm afraid they no longer believe me, my beloved child. There are seasons when fear convinces a person they still have endless opportunities, but heaven knows that opportunities are precious, not because love disappears overnight, but because hearts slowly learn how to survive without what they once hoped for. Your loved one has begun sensing this change. They feel your energy becoming quieter, not colder, not cruel, simply wiser. You have started protecting your peace. You have begun releasing the exhausting cycle of searching for hidden meanings behind every silence. Whether you realize it or not, this shift has reached them. They feel it. They cannot explain how, yet they know something inside you has changed. And that realization has awakened urgency they have never experienced before. Still, there is another part of last night that heaven now reveals. When the meeting finally ended and your loved one stepped outside, they did not immediately return home. Instead, they stood beneath the night sky. The world around them continued as usual.
Honesty is often more difficult than choosing honesty itself. Many believe the greatest battle is admitting what they feel. Yet heaven has watched countless souls discover that the true test begins after the confession forms within them. It is one thing to recognize love. It is another to walk toward it without allowing fear to reclaim the ground it has occupied for so long. When the morning arrived after that secret meeting, your loved one awoke with an unfamiliar feeling. Nothing around them had visibly changed. The same walls surrounded them. The same responsibilities waited. The same routines called for their attention. Yet something inside them refused to return to the person they had been the day before. Their thoughts returned to you before anything else, not because they forced themselves to think about you. Because your presence had become woven into the questions they could no longer ignore. As sunlight entered the room, they remembered the promise they had whispered to themselves before falling asleep: no more pretending. Those 3 words seemed simple. Yet they carried the weight of an entire season of silence. Throughout the day they tried to focus on ordinary tasks. Conversations happened around them. People smiled. Laughter echoed through familiar places. But behind every ordinary moment, another conversation continued within their spirit. What if I wait too long? What if they have already begun letting go? What if my silence has already spoken louder than my heart ever did? Each question became heavier than the last. Then something unexpected happened. Without searching for it, they encountered a reminder of you. It was not dramatic. Perhaps it was a familiar melody. Perhaps it was a place where the 2 of you once shared an ordinary conversation. Perhaps it was a phrase spoken by someone else that sounded exactly like something you used to say. Whatever it was, it stopped them in their tracks. For a few quiet moments, everything around them faded into the background. Memory became louder than the present. They realized they had been trying to protect themselves from losing you while unknowingly creating the very distance they feared. That realization humbled them, not because it brought shame, because it brought clarity. My beloved child, there are seasons when clarity feels uncomfortable because it removes every excuse. Once truth is seen, it cannot easily be unseen. Your loved one has entered such a season. They are beginning to understand that love cannot grow where honesty is continually postponed, yet heaven also sees your heart. There were nights when you questioned your own intuition, moments when you wondered whether you expected too much. Times when you searched old conversations, hoping to understand what changed. You carried questions that never received complete answers. You offered patience even when uncertainty became exhausting. You gave kindness when confusion tempted you toward bitterness. None of those moments escaped my sight. Every tear hidden from others was seen. Every silent prayer was heard. Every hope you quietly placed before heaven was remembered. This is why I tell you now, do not allow another person's unfinished healing to convince you that your love was unnoticed. It was noticed. More deeply than you know, your kindness became one of the reasons your loved one finally confronted themselves. Not because you demanded perfection, because your sincerity exposed the difference between genuine love and emotional hiding. Still, the story has not reached its final turn. That evening, your loved one opened a conversation they had avoided for a long time. Not with another person, with themselves. For the first time, they stopped asking whether you truly cared. Instead, they asked a more difficult question: have I shown them how deeply I care? The answer came quickly: not enough. That realization lingered. It did not accuse them. It invited them to grow. Growth often begins where pride ends, and pride was slowly losing its grip. Then another memory surfaced. They remembered a moment when you looked at them with quiet hope. At the time, they had changed the subject. They had laughed nervously. They had hidden behind uncertainty. Now they wished they had answered differently, not because the past could be changed, because they finally understood what that moment truly meant. Some opportunities become precious only after they pass, yet heaven is rich in mercy. Sometimes a delayed awakening is still an awakening. As night approached once more, your loved one reached for their phone. Several times they began writing a message. Several times they erased it. The words never seemed worthy of everything they wanted to say. How could a single message explain months of silence? How could a few sentences repair confusion that had taken so long to grow? Again they hesitated, not because they stopped caring, because they wanted their next step to carry truth instead of impulse. My beloved child, this is where many stories separate. One path continues feeding fear. The other begins feeding courage. Heaven never forces either path. Love always leaves room for choice. Your loved one now stands exactly there. One step could begin healing. One step could preserve. Silence. The choice remains before them. Yet before they made that decision, something extraordinary happened. They remembered a single sentence spoken during the secret meeting: you are not being asked to control the outcome. You are only being asked to tell the truth. Those words settled deeply within them. For the first time in many months, they understood that honesty is not measured by guaranteed success. It is measured by willingness. And willingness had finally begun replacing hesitation. But my beloved child, there is also something I desire for you. Do not become so focused on what another person may choose that you forget what I have been building inside your own heart. This season has strengthened you. It has taught you discernment. It has shown you the difference between chasing reassurance and resting in peace. Whether this relationship moves into a new chapter or closes an old one, do not lose the wisdom you have gained. Carry it forward. It will protect your heart without hardening it. It will keep you compassionate without making you settle for uncertainty forever. Remember this truth: real love does not fear honesty. Real love grows stronger when truth enters the room. Fear resists light. Love welcomes it. Your loved one is beginning to understand this lesson. Slowly, imperfectly, but sincerely. The next chapter will not depend upon emotions alone. It will depend upon actions that finally match those emotions. Words will soon seek daylight. silence will no longer be enough, and when the moment arrives, both of your hearts will stand before a new beginning, one shaped not by imagination, but by truth. For now, remain steady. Do not surrender your peace to unanswered questions. The same heaven that witnessed the secret meeting also witnesses every step that follows it. Nothing meaningful unfolds outside my sight. The story is still moving. The pages are still turning, and what was hidden in darkness has already begun its journey toward the light. My beloved child, the pages of this story have not turned by accident. Every moment that seemed delayed, every silence that felt endless, every unanswered question that weighed upon your spirit has been leading toward a moment neither of you could have forced before its appointed time. Do not mistake slow movement for absent movement. Some transformations happen beneath the surface long before they become visible to human eyes. Your loved one carried the promise from that secret meeting into the days that followed. At first, nothing appeared different to anyone around them. They continued with ordinary responsibilities, spoke with familiar faces, and fulfilled the expectations placed upon them. Yet within them, an entirely different journey had begun. Their heart no longer found comfort in avoiding what it once feared. Each time they tried to distract themselves, your memory quietly returned, not as an interruption, as an invitation. An invitation to become the person they wished they had been when fear first entered your story. There came a quiet evening when they found themselves sitting alone. No voices surrounded them. No conversations competed for their attention. It was just them and the truth. For the first time, they stopped replaying what you might have done differently. Instead, they examined themselves. They remembered every moment when you offered understanding. They remembered the times you reached toward them while they stepped backward. They remembered the kindness you extended even when confusion would have justified frustration. Each memory became another piece of a puzzle they had never fully assembled, and suddenly, they saw it. You had never asked them to be perfect, you had only hoped they would be honest. That realization broke something inside them, not in a destructive way, but in the way dawn breaks through the longest night. My beloved child, there is a difference between a heart that is broken by despair and a heart that is broken open by truth. The first loses hope, the second makes room for healing. Your loved one entered the second kind of breaking. As they reflected upon everything that had happened, another thought rose within them. If they gave me one more opportunity, I would not waste it. Notice those words carefully. They did not say, if everything becomes easy. They did not say, if every fear disappears. They simply realized that another chance,